Welcome to the home of Bugatti and welcome to a first look at the brand new Bugatti Tourbillon. You join me here in Molsheim, France, to be joined by none other than Mate Rimac, president of Bugatti, to explore the new car and to take a full first look inside and out. I'm here in front of the Chateau, a famous location, the home of the company that 20 years ago introduced the Veyron, a car that was leagues ahead of the rest of the market, an engineering masterpiece, shattering records and spawning all sorts of new variants along the way. 10 years later, the Successor arrived, the Bugatti Chiron, again leaping ahead in terms of what it could offer, what it was capable of. Well, now we're here for a new era, a new chapter, a new generation of Bugatti, a new car that is about to blow your mind away. Let's head straight into Remy's Sud and go take a look. At this point in time, not all that much is known about the car that lies beneath these covers. A new generation of Bugatti powered by a V16 engine that's been teased in the build-up, but we're about to take a look at this. In fact, I think to kickstart things, come in, let's have a little bit of a sneak peek at what's going on here. Pull these covers up, a familiar shaped grille at the front, the new Bugatti. So to see it in more detail, who better than Mate to show us around? Hi guys, I'm Shmi, hello and welcome back to the channel and welcome to the new Bugatti.
So Tim, here it is, the new Bugatti.
This is it. This is an entirely new era. At this point in time, all I've seen is the silhouette, some vague familiarity with the styling, but this is a new car.
Absolutely, this is something that doesn't happen that often. A Bugatti completely developed from scratch. Didn't happen in the last 20 years.
Should we pull the cover back?
Let's do that.
Reveal the car, take a first look. Wow. That is spectacular. What an incredible car. You've got to give us a quick introduction. What are we looking at?
This is the Bugatti Tourbillon.
The Bugatti Tourbillon.
Yes, a tourbillon is a mechanism that improves the precision of sophisticated watches. And we were inspired by watchmaking, that's why we called it tourbillon. It has a V16 naturally aspirated 1000 horsepower combustion engine that revs up to 9,500 RPMs, assisted by 3 electric motors and a 25 kilowatt hour battery pack that provide additional 800 horsepower for a total of 1800 horsepower. Actually, the engine is 400 millimeters longer than the W16, and we still managed, with the addition of 3 electric motors and the bigger battery, to keep the car almost the same length, just a little bit longer, 27 millimeters. From the outside, you see it's very recognizable as a Bugatti, but from inside, complete revolution. The interior is completely different. The powertrain, everything is done from scratch for this car specifically. There'll be 250 of those built, and we'll start deliveries in 26.
This is quite amazing. There's a lot to take in. We need to go through this in detail. The Bugatti Tourbillon. Starting from the very front, the design of this car. I mean, I'm taking my first look at it, but it's very recognizable from horseshoe grille, center line, the design even at the rear. That's got to be an important part of creating a completely new car as well.
Absolutely. What we want it to be is, when you take the badges off, it's very recognizable as a Bugatti with all the design elements that you have mentioned, the horseshoe, the center line, the C line, the two-tone paint scheme. And of course, everything has a function, starting from the front, like this flying fender, as we call it, where you have air going actually underneath the headlight and around the surface area here, which we call the shoulder. Like you can see, the car has very strong shoulders. And actually, all of that is a result not of, let's say, design just coming on top of the technical part, but actually everything working super closely together. Lots of technical changes that enabled a much more muscular and dynamic design.
So starting from the very front, I notice when I look at the grille, of course, a familiar, iconic part of any Bugatti car, but reshaped, reworked?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, the whole front is completely different. And it's one of my favorite parts of the car, because in a Bugatti, you sit quite far forward. And when you sit in the driver's seat, you notice that your left foot is pushed slightly to the right, and you notice the bulge around it is actually the shape of the wheel, so it's the wheel arch. So your feet are sitting actually right somewhere here, and you have a very short nose. but we have managed to push the whole nose down and not increase the overhang, while at the same time we have now 2 electric motors in here that provide over 600 horsepower in the front, 2 gearboxes, an inverter, all the cooling system for the battery, for the hybrid system, and a larger trunk at the same time. And it starts with the horseshoe grille, where the air doesn't anymore, like in the Chiron, the air was flowing in and then onto a angled radiator, and then the air was going under the car, which is suboptimal for high-speed aerodynamics. What we do now is the air flows left and right, and the trunk is actually a deep trunk going from here all the way to the bottom of the car, and then the air flowing out on top, generating downforce. So it's a whole different package, but the amazing thing about it is in less space, we have now the hybrid system in the front and more trunk space.
Which is quite amazing. What I find fascinating as we walk around it is how the car, or the design of the car, as you said, take off the badge and you know what car it is, but is so futuristic compared to anything that's come before, and yet so recognizable. You know, as we come round, the familiar shape that outlines the passenger cabin.
That's the balance. I mean, we didn't want to, let's say, shock with the new design and to show that it's, let's say, a completely new era with some, you know, out of proportion design. So we wanted to have a revolutionary approach, but inside it's really a revolutionary approach.
I do need to point out that the door is now hinged differently to before.
Yes, the first Bugatti with a dihedral door.
Okay, wow.
This is actually how the customer cars will open as well. You, Tim, for sure know that cars with such doors that have gas struts have sometimes difficulties. When it's hot, the air in the gas strut expands and then the door snaps open. When it's cold, the air contracts and then the door is kind of hanging. And now with an electric opening, you don't have that problem. It works any temperature, and also for maybe people who don't have so much strength in their hand, it's easier to open and close.
And opening the roof section as well.
Yeah, helping to get in and out. So one thing we did, what you will also notice, the tunnel is a lot narrower.
Yes.
So there's lots of technical things that actually lead to the design. So the Chiron and the Veyron had the gearbox in front of the engine between the passengers.
Yep.
So you had the very wide tunnel. So you were sitting far apart, which pushes also the windows, what we call the greenhouse, the glasses of the car out. And here we have now the battery in the tunnel and the gearbox behind the engine, which means we can have the greenhouse further inwards, and you have this shoulder here, which makes the car look masculine and dynamic. But another effect is we reduce the frontal area, which is most important for high speed and drag at high speeds. And another thing we did, we submerged the whole cabin downwards. And that's why we have this roof opening now, the big door, to make it easier to get in and out, because the cabin is now lower, still the same interior space, but you're sitting closer together and lower, which allowed for less drag because of less frontal area. And we use that, let's say, credit of less drag to do some beautiful things, like having this big cutout to see the engine, which is not that, let's say, preferred by the aerodynamicist, but it's beautiful to look at.
And beautiful is a big part of this, right? The feeling, the emotion, the design, because that looks like
absolutely.
Few words can describe the feeling of the back of the engine bay. It's kind of obviously reminding me of the Veyron Supersport WRE days, the way it's shaped, the way it's created, but housing this new power plant back here, an all new engine that's been created for the car.
And you know, while everyone else is going downsizing, we are going upsizing. So this one actually has more displacement than the engine it replaces. So we went from 8 liters to 8.3. And with Bugatti, another thing we like to say is what you see is what you get. So this is no cover, no fake kind of engine, let's say, replacement. This is actually the plenum, the air intake of the actual engine. Right up there. Now, at the back of the car, some obvious things immediately. The light design running all the way across, again, feels like an evolution of things that are familiar. Clearly, active aerodynamics as well, working back here. And then the diffuser. The diffuser stands out. Yeah, and you know, this is again the architecture of the car. Like, such things cannot be an afterthought that you add on later. So you can see how tall the diffuser ends. It's like knee kind of level. And that only means it starts really far in front of the car, because a diffuser in this kind of configuration cannot be more than 11 degrees angle, because otherwise the airflow separates from the surface and then it doesn't work anymore. So it has to be maximum 11 degrees. So in order to end here, it has to start all the way up front. So actually it starts just below the seat. And in order to achieve that, so you have to imagine the W16 engine has cylinders that are offset against each other, while the V16 has cylinders one behind each other, 8 cylinders in 2 rows. And that makes the engine a lot longer, but also narrower. So these Venturi tunnels run left and right from the engine, but also the engine is at an angle so that these diffusers can work. And then you have the exhausts separating the airflow from underneath the Venturi tunnels and the turbulent airflow here in the rear. And the great thing about that is we actually don't need the spoiler to go top speed. So the spoiler only deploys as an air brake and in handling mode, but for top speed, the diffuser generates so much downforce that we don't need to deploy this.
Can we talk top speed?
So this car is limited to 445 kilometers per hour.
445.
It's like 278, I believe, miles per hour.
Casual.
Yeah. Limited. So
limited. Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite an extraordinary number. Obviously, I'd been wondering earlier what it might be capable of. At that kind of speed, the amount you have to think about aerodynamics, reducing, as you were saying, the frontal area and the cabin size, it makes a huge impact.
Absolutely. That's what, everyone talks about drag coefficient, but the actual drag is drag coefficient times frontal area. So what we were really trying to do is to reduce the frontal area, because that gives you, some space to do some things that otherwise you would lose. Like, for example, the visible engine, if you had more frontal area. So this really gave us a lot of credit to play elsewhere.
Yeah. Just standing back around the front, clearly maintaining the theme. I remember when the Chiron launched, the quad headlamps, the quad headlamp light units within was always a bit of a play towards the quad turbos and the 16-cylinder engine and 4 wheels, 4-wheel drive, all 4 just constantly reoccurring. It's almost a continuation of that again, but differently.
Exactly. I mean, others would kill to have such a recognizable design and so many unique, distinct design elements. So of course we wanted to keep them, but further, bring them to the next level. So one thing that I really like, and that's really like playing with your mind, when you stand anywhere here, and I always say, like, if I would have to bet my kidney, if the rear track was wider than the front, I would bet it in a moment, but it's actually not.
Really?
It's this optical illusion, we call it the Coke bottle effect, with this kind of surface here of the
skinny
silhouette.
body down the side.
Exactly, and it looks like you could bet that this is that this wheel is more out compared to the front, but it's not.
But it's the way it's shaped.
Yes.
It's how do I say this? Like very neatly integrated aerodynamics. The car doesn't scream that it's got big wings and crazy fins and things.
That's what the diffuser is for, to do that aerodynamic from the underside of the car. And actually, it's interesting because even the suspension has to be aerodynamic, because the diffuser is so tall that the suspension is sticking out within the Venturi tunnel. So the suspension arm has to be like a wing shape. And then another interesting thing, so the central line, we wanted, of course, to make it useful also, not just a design element. So the third brake light is integrated in it, and you can see it's a huge light. But there's a minimum surface requirement that you have to have for visibility in order to homologate it. So if you are behind the car, in another car, you are sitting lower, and that surface reduces, like the surface you see. So this is barely meeting the requirement. But then when the spoiler deploys, you see less of it. So there's another little light in here when the spoiler deploys to compensate for the loss of third light visibility that you get when it goes up.
So, of course, we need to talk a little bit more about the powertrain while we're back here. 8.3 litre naturally aspirated V16.
Exactly.
Revs to 9.5?
9,500. Wonderful sound. At the beginning I was concerned it might sound like a V8 or 2 V8s next to each other, but it doesn't. Like, especially at higher revs, it's totally different. It's not a V10, it's not a V6, it's not a V12. It's really like its unique V16 sound. It's really amazing. Facts and figures. Power, torque. 1,000 horsepower 900 newton meters of torque, and then you have 3 electric motors. So it's really interesting how it works together. The engine is a little bit of old school, right? So if you have a naturally aspirated engine, it's not, you know, the last squeezing out of the last performance bit like you have today with very highly turbocharged engines.
Yeah.
But that's only possible because of a very high-tech, high-performance electric powertrain. So the electric powertrain is basically Formula 1 technology. So in terms of technology, we went like with the electric powertrain all the way up, while the combustion engine is more trimmed for emotions. But the electric powertrain enabled such an engine. So you have 3 electric motors. So the gearbox is now here. The gearbox is now behind the engine. And there's 1 electric motor on the gearbox. The gearbox is 8-speed double clutch. Then that electric motor is used to crank the engine, but also to assist the engine. And in all electric mode, it also drives the rear wheels. While in the front, we have 2 electric motors. They are all the same. So each motor revs up to 24,000 RPM. And it can deliver over 400 horsepower each motor, which is combined over 1,000 horsepower, but the battery is the limiting factor. So let's say the motors could give more, but the battery is limiting the total output.
So you mentioned electric drive. You have an electric range?
It's actually quite substantial. So the battery pack, 25 kilowatt hours, that's substantially more than any other sports car. It's like an order of magnitude.
A lot more,
so
3 or 4 times.
I would say even more. So this allows for a range, let's say conservatively 50, 60, 70 kilometers. So like 40, 50 miles.
Interesting. That is quite a significant number.
Yes. And you have 800 horsepower all-wheel drive. So if you want to drive in electric mode, for whatever reason, you want to sneak out, or, I mean, don't wake up the neighbors, or, or, you know, some cities might get restricted in the future when it comes to emissions, you can do that with enough performance to not have to use the engine. But we actually give the freedom to the driver. The driver can choose to be full all electric, only combustion without the electric powertrain helping at all, or a hybrid where the car helps or chooses itself where to distribute the power.
And I'm assuming that, given the way you mentioned it fires, presumably it has a very sharp, very aggressive start note, which is going to be quite special to hear.
Yes, and I hope we will be able to have it without a soft limiter.
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed.
Let's have a look inside.
Now, with a name like Tourbillon, I have some expectation for how it's going to look up close. Wow. Look at this.
So one of the architectural things that I mentioned is the tunnel, where the seats are now closer together, but the interior space per passenger is the same, like in the Chiron. So there is not less space, it's actually slightly more. But another interesting thing is, since the engine is so much longer, and we had to package a large battery and 3 electric motors, I didn't know at the beginning, like, what does it mean for the designers if the car gets longer? Like, it might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing, but they told me, like, don't make the car longer. Like, that's a disaster. So we had to package a 40 centimeter longer engine and this battery and all that without making the car longer. So one of the things we did, the seat is semi-fixed. So it does move up and down, so you can regulate the height. You can regulate the seat angle, the backrest angle, but there is no rails and the seat doesn't move backwards and forwards, but you do have moving pedals.
Interesting.
Electrically.
So it's all fixed mounted inside the carbon fiber monocoque?
Yeah, well, it does move up and down.
Yeah, sorry, I get you.
Yeah.
And then down here, adjustable
Beautiful
pedal
pedals.
set. I mean, even just down to the way that's presented, the carbon behind,
Yes.
the design, the
And
styling.
the machined aluminum. And what you see here is what we call the skeleton design. Mm-hmm. So you have this beautiful machined from a solid block of glass cover, so that you can see inside in this, let's say, skeletonized way, where you can see the mechanics of the buttons. And you can see there is no screens. You have the analog instrument cluster, you have the analog interior here in the central console. There is a screen that pops out here, so it slides out and rotates in a beautiful mechanical motion. And you can have it if you like to use it, but if you don't want to have what we call, if you want to be on digital detox, because you are surrounded with screens all the time now, you can use the car completely without any screens. And that is also a result of us thinking about the future, because this car will be around for a long time, even when we are long gone.
And any current screen will be dated very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. We want this car to be beautiful in 50 years, 70 years, in 100 years, and the screen won't be something beautiful.
It's one of the things I actually quite appreciate about the Veyron looking back.
Yeah.
Is that at that time people were trying to put in screens and they were very small and awkward. Whereas by not having one, to this day it works. Now, I've got to point out, as I'm sure everyone has, 550.
Yeah, so let's say the car can do a bit more than it is limited to at the moment. And another interesting thing...
The floating steering wheel.
Yes, so you have...
Wow.
We call it the fixed hub steering wheel. So you have a planetary gearbox in there that enables the center to stay fixed. And then everything is analog. So you see in the middle you have a rev counter and speed. So you have two needles actually. Unfortunately in this model, this is 3D printed, so it doesn't look that great. But actually we make this in Switzerland with a Swiss watchmaker, and it's all machined from titanium, aluminum, there's Rubins inside, sapphire glass, not for the sake of it, but because it's actually technically necessary. And all of these mechanisms, the cogs you see there, the wheels, they all turn because that's actually what moves the needles. It's not some kind of fake mechanism, it's actually the mechanism that moves everything. And on the right side, you have power and horsepower. Again, two needles, one for the combustion engine, one for the electric powertrain, and you add them up to get the total power that propels you. On the left side, you have the temperature gauge and the fuel gauge, and interestingly, in an analog way, you have the state of charge of the battery shown as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Taking a battery and displaying it in an analog way.
Exactly. We do weird things sometimes. And then you have the modes. So on the left side are the chassis modes. So you have EB, which is like comfort, sport, track, and custom. And then you have on the right side powertrain modes. So it's electric, hybrid, combustion, and battery charge. And the cool thing is, which I cannot show you in this model here, the way you start a car is you push this button in, and that starts the powertrain, basically hybrid. But then it pops out slightly, and you pull it like a choke to start the engine.
Wow.
So it's a manual way of starting the engine, and then like it never shuts down. So the engine will always stay on when you manually, let's say, crank it like that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
This really is a blend. What I'm feeling is a blend of modern and heritage.
Absolutely. We try to use the best from technology, so like the electric powertrain to enable the emotional combustion engine, but then everything that the customer touches and feels is, let's say, like very analog and mechanical.
But with all of these new ideas, the way this rotates, but still with paddles mounted on the rear, the way that everything's made, but some familiar details, the light that wraps around the center.
Yes.
I mean, there's so much to it. We're just touching on the surface here.
Oh, it's a very special car. And yeah, even some practical things, like we have two wireless charging pads for your smartphone. And again, what I cannot show here in this car, here is a beautiful space to put your key and the speed key when you want to go the top speed. So one trick that we really tried very hard to pull off. Okay, one was to not make the car longer. That was a big one. Then the second one is weight. So we have, so just the 25 kilowatt hour battery pack is 200 kilos. About 200 kilos, 180. And then 3 electric motors and all of that. So you would expect the car to be significantly heavier with a bigger engine and all of that stuff. But we really, really tried very hard to keep it the same weight or slightly below. So
less than 2,000 kilos.
Less than 2,000 in any case. That's the target. And one of the ways we achieved that was by 3D printing a lot. So 3D printing metal. So this is, let's say, the suspension arm. As far as I know, this will be the first or one of the first production cars with such things. So you see it's a very organic shape. This geometry is different than what you can achieve with traditional casting or forging or machining, what you would usually do for this part. And in this way, we increase the strength and reduce weight. So this was just, let's say, one of the details where we got quite some weight out, but the whole car is done in that way. So we really started with everything from a ground, like a blank sheet of paper, and saw where we can make architectural choices to make the car lighter. For example, not making it longer also makes it lighter. A longer car is of course heavier, but also like in details like this, where we can shave off weight.
And then also here, this is, as you were talking about, the glass piece.
Yeah, this is really beautiful. Like this is real sapphire glass that's then machined down to the shape. Like, this is not plastic, and it's super difficult to get this geometry. And one of the things you have to do with interior, and a lot of the car and any car is actually directed by homologation. So you have to shoot dummy heads at this thing at high speed, and this should not shatter. So you have to, first of all, make this part, but then make sure it doesn't like just fall apart in a crash. And then here comes the screen. And the screen, actually, another reason why we have it is, again, homologation. In the US, you have to have a reversing camera.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you cannot make a car without a screen. But we said, when already the screen, first of all, you can make it disappear if you don't want to see it. So just when you back up, it pops out.
Yep.
When you're done, it can pop back in, and you don't need it. But what I hate to see is our customers driving with cars with their phone in their hand with Google Maps, and like, that's not
it's not right.
That's not right. So really simple infotainment focused on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, like just, you know, use what's already existing there. They have great interfaces. We have our own, of course, functions, but it's mostly about Apple CarPlay.
Bring what you're familiar with to the car. And seeing it now, actually, first time I've looked back with the doors up, that's quite a sense of occasion. When
you design a car, usually you have two design teams, exterior design and interior design. And the rest in between is done by the engineers in the most, let's say, technically sound way, and the way it's the easiest for the engineers.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to make the life easy for the engineers this time, so we introduced the third design discipline, which is rolling chassis design, which looks at the car in its naked form. So without the body panels on, how it looks like when it's in this shape. Even if you never see it, only you see it when you come here to our atelier in Molsheim when the car is built for the customer. That's when the customer sees it. But still, if you never see it, we want you to know that it's beautiful under the skin. And not just that, but also every piece you take off the car, you can put it on a wall and it becomes a piece of art.
So every single component, every bolt, everything?
Exactly. So you can see that, for example, on little things like hinges.
Yeah.
Like when you open the fuel cap or the trunk, and how it looks in that area that you usually don't see, but underneath, you will see that on the production car, all of these details. And, you know, I spent hours and hours talking about how exactly the hinge needs to look like. Yep. And that's, for me, how you see really if somebody really cares about the product and not just about, you know, the appearance from outside, but the substance that's hidden, let's say, from direct view.
Well, I've got to say, standing here, taking in this car, what a way to start the next era. What a way to kick it off. If comparable, it's no longer Bugatti. This is very much Bugatti.
Thank you, Tim.
Congratulations on bringing this to reality. What a special thing.
Thank you so much.
And what an exciting time.
I'm very proud of the team that stands behind it. So hundreds of people that gave years of their life to it.
While I'm here inside taking a look at the new Bugatti Tourbillon, I'd like to show you a few other details, things that I've noticed while we've been walking around it, perhaps small visual cues. For example, note here in the center of the tail lamp is the Bugatti script, the way that's integrated within the lens itself. In fact, just look at the intricacies of all of the different light units that are inside there and the way the curvature follows that of the bodywork above it. Of course, this is an opening for airflow that sits beneath. And talking of airflow, come round to the sides, look here at the vanes and the way the air is managed coming up through the front of the bodywork and around the side of the car here with the blue, white and red of the French flag in the detailing that you have at the sides. And in fact, when it comes to detailing, of course, with Bugatti, everything is possible. So there'll be all sorts of different materials that can be used. Of course, paints, designs, detailing that can be added, carbon fiber. But this thing is a real step ahead. It is quite the impressive car to have been here to see. What a day this has been. To come here and to be able to see this for the first time. Before arriving, I knew nothing about this car, about this new era of Bugatti, the Tourbillon, a car of which 250 units will be made. I hear they might be quite heavily sold already, which is quite exciting, of course, looking towards the future as well. But 250 cars being the start, perhaps, of what comes next. Of course, with the Chiron, it was 500 cars. That included the Pur Sport, the Super Sport, and a number of other different versions. But with the Mistral following, almost filling the gap between the two models, the last of the old chapter before this is now here. The price is 3.8 million euros net of taxes, which is interesting as well, because if you look back at what the Chiron was a decade ago, this is effectively matched to the same price once you factored in inflation, but you're getting a lot of car included in that. Where this sits at the next chapter, the next stage of this, I'm going to say pinnacle of automotive segment, really, when it comes to what a Bugatti offers, is fascinating. And I have to say, the numbers are mind-boggling. 277 miles per hour, limited top speed, 445 kilometers per hour from this. You've got to take a minute to get your head around that. So here we have it, a first look at the brand new Bugatti Tourbillon. What a name, what a car, and what an opportunity to come and take a first look here today with Mate Rimac. A big thanks to Mate and the entire team here for the chance to come and see this today, and of course a thanks to you guys as well. So let me know, what do you think? What do you think of the new Tourbillon? I'm sure we're going to be seeing plenty of it in the future, and I cannot wait. That's it for now though. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers!